I live in Madison, and Madison is a place of scholarship and science and reason and trying all kinds of things under the sun to try and make them work. And it is a place of achievement, and it is a place of all those kinds of things. And people believe in them very strongly. And they easily become idols. And they really do produce constantly an enormous level of misery because they're terrible gods. One of the first things that happens when you come to Jesus is Jesus is God. And you're like, oh, so none of this other stuff is. It's really enlightening because the world is full of amazing things that are terrible gods. And one of the ways that Jesus brings enormous happiness to people is by humiliating us intellectually over and over and over and over again. And forcing us to accept the fact that we are humans and we are not gods. Did you notice the end of the race? Everything he does, Solomon did as a man, he goes, it's all meaningless. And then it's, why? Because it's chasing after the wind, it's transitory. And he says, and then at the end he goes, I know everything God does will last forever. It's driving me crazy. One of the purposes of Ecclesiastes is to say to a cultural elite, Solomon's lived his whole life. He's got this court around him. He's speaking to a cultural, secular elite that's hiding within the theocracy of Israel, who are really men and women of the world. And he realizes that they have lost themselves as he had lost himself for decades in trying to be God rather than actually doing the work of being a human, full of toil, full of repetitiveness, and when you accept that, full of joy. And so he is very careful to demolish the idols that are so relevant in places like Madison, where I'm from, and Boston, where you live. And so I just want to take you through the logic of Ecclesiastes this morning and try to help you see it so that hopefully it'll affect you right now, but also so that you can read this book well the rest of your life. Because it is one of the most spiritually serious books in the Bible on happiness, and it is written almost entirely in secular language. So it starts like this. Meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. The older translations used to use the word vanity. The word, the Hebrew word is actually literally the word for breath or vapor. So it means this. The characteristics of a breath is that it's insubstantial and it's transitory, right? You can blow on your hand all day, it's not moving, right? And how many people are like sitting there like right now you can't pay attention because you're like remembering with deep memory and compassion like one of your exhales this morning, like, oh, that one at 7:25:24 was like so good. So good. I just remember it was so good, right? It's gone. It's gone. And what Solomon is saying is not that literally everything has no meaning or he wouldn't be speaking in linguistic sentences. What he's saying is that the meaning we naturally, intrinsically aspire to give things, they don't have. They just don't have it. And it produces utter misery for us because we look at them and we want them to mean more than they do, and they don't, and they can't bear it, and we destroy their meaning, and it grieves us and makes us hate life, and it is such a weight, and it produces human misery among the people with the least reason to be miserable. But it's so predictable. So this is kind of how he breaks it down, sort of the problem. And that is that he says there is this repetitive nature to life where things happen over and over and over again. And yet there is something in the human experience that we sort of never tire of it. And you're like, well, I tire of things all the time. Not really. Have you ever seen the YouTube videos where people will take jokes from a previous show, and they're literally the exact same joke in the exact same sentence, delivered the exact same way? Like, it really ought to be plagiarism in some way. Maybe it's the same Hollywood writer, I don't know. And it's sort of hilarious again. So, like, there's this, 12-minute long one from Simpsons and the Family Guy. Literally, the exact same line. 12 minutes of it. Simpsons, Family Guy. Simpsons, Family Guy, right? There's another one for Friends from the 90s and Scrubs. Same jokes. There's this one point. It's the same. They play the same bit of the same song. The characters are doing the same dance, and they make the same joke. It is literally the exact same thing. And really, if you just look at the plots of most of the shows or movies we watch, we are just watching the same show and the same movie over and over and over and over. The only thing that's different is there's a new hot 24-year-old in it. That's it. Right? And we keep turning it out. There's something, and he says, look, the rivers flow to the ocean doesn't fill up, the water goes back, it just happens again and again and again, and you'd think it would tire us the heck out, and yet the eye never gets done seeing, the ear never gets done hearing, we never get sick of gossiping the same thing about people over and over again, falling for the same gullible things, doing the same stupid stuff, and we just do it over, because there's something in us that seeks repetition and hates it at the same time, and it bothers the heck out of us. And in addition to that, he says, God has done something where he has made everything beautiful, key prepositional phrase, in its time, and only in its time. And yet, he has put in our hearts this desire for eternity, for everlasting. And so, we recognize that something flowers into beauty, and we can't stop it. Right? I was talking with this single guy in my church who's kind of an idiot right now, and he was thinking about dating this girl, and he literally asked me, do you think she's pretty enough, right? And so, the girl's 24, and I was like, I don't even understand the question. Is she female? I'm 38. I'm old enough to be a lecturer. Everybody under 26 is gorgeous. I don't even know what you mean. Right? Because I'm old enough now to start having health problems. I'm old enough to see wrinkles on my face. I'm old enough to know I'm getting older and I can't deny it. I'm old enough to realize that I can't do in basketball the things I did 5 years ago, and I have to wear a knee brace twice a week when I play. I get that, and so I see the flowering of all youth, whether it's young women, whether it's my own children. I have a 12-year-old that just turned into a woman overnight. And I can't stop it. There's nothing I can do. It's going to go on. Even my wife understands this. She's like, don't bring me flowers, just bring me a gift card and draw a flower on it with a Sharpie marker, because I don't know why it's romantic so that we can watch something die together and flush our money down the toilet, okay? I'm like, I love this woman, right? And so there's this reality of this intersection between the flowering of things and this expiration to them and the horror of it. And yet, God has put in our hearts, Solomon's the desire for these things to endure, for them to matter in their permanence, is tattooed in us. And we can't get rid of it. And so it freaks us the heck out. And because our idol has no answer for that, we are constantly flipping out and driving ourselves crazy so that we come to hate life, because we cannot fathom what God has done. And a lot of people want to believe that this is a philosopher's question. Ecclesiastes, it's kind of a brainy book. And it's not. You can be a more analytical, philosophical person and be like, everything's meaningless. But if you're a mom or you got a job, you're still going to say something like, I feel bored, unhappy, I'm feeling anxious and desperate about my life. All that is the feeling that goes along with the other proposition. Everybody, every human person, elite or not, struggles with this same reality. The burden that God has put on humanity, he has put on humanity. We just talk about our feelings differently. You can see this in the nature of how Solomon talks about the work of his life. When he talks about actually doing the thing, in this case, he's talking about building. He's like, so I decided to build this amazing park in the city, right? And when I was doing it, it was fun. And then the minute I thought about what it meant, I got angry. I got so mad. Because the park is just a stinking park. It's all it is. It's just a park. It's just some trees. It's just some water. It's just a place to sit and talk. That's all it's ever going to be. It's never going to be anything more than that, and all you're ever going to do is just plant stuff. And then that's it. And then the trees will die, and people will walk on the grass, and you got to replant it, and like people dig out rocks to throw at each other, and you're like, ugh. But he says when he did it, he took delight in it. And then he says this. In retrospect, he goes, and this was the reward for my labor. The reward of joy is in the doing itself, which is why the achievement-focused person is always so unhappy. The payoff never comes because the payoff is the thing itself. The payoff is happening right now. The payoff of parenting is in the moment. It's at bedtime. It's not what that's going to produce in your little scholar later, right? The enjoyment of marriage is taking enjoyment in the other person. It's the same thing with the enjoyment of friendship. All these things, the benefit, the joy, the beauty, the greatness, the pleasure that is meant to be taken in them is in the thing itself, in the moment that it is, because that's all that it is, and all you are as a human, so all you're supposed to get in it is what it is. You're not God. So you can't imbue it with some cosmic reality of mental consilience where you possess the universe in your brain so you can somehow take revenge that you aren't, the universe didn't make it, and are going to die. And people with plenty of resources can be as miserable as possible and are constantly because they don't know they're a human. And so it produces this burden that God has laid on people will either destroy you or save you. One of the graces of God is that if you refuse Him, He has constructed reality and human experience in such a way as that if you are sensitive to truth, it will drive you into misery. And it's an expression and an action of His love. There's a certain way you could look at it to say, when you look at this burden that God has laid on people, it offers us essentially three modern options. And these are, I say modern, but these are the same options people have used for kind of millennia, right? And one is like, well, nothing makes sense, so I'll think what I want. The cynical view. Right? I can't put it all together, so I'll think whatever I want. And then there's like, nothing makes sense, so I'll do whatever I want. The hedonist view. And those kind of go together well. Right? I can think what I want, and so I can do what I want, and I can be what I want, and I can define who I am, and I can do all that kind of stuff. And those two options together, they have to die a brutal and vicious death before our eyes, before we realize that that is an act of love of God drawing us to the fourth, which is, I'm actually a human being. It's actually not within my realm of capability, no matter what my IQ is, or what institution I'm studying at, to thread the web of the entire universe and bind together its whole meaning in an act of temporal eternity. I cannot fathom what God has done. And God has done it intentionally so that we would revere Him. Because that's actually the right work of a human being. So part of this, you might just say like, okay, so well then, why didn't Solomon just like write a one-page treatise? Like he could have been like, man, you need to give it up. You just need to let it go. You need to let go and let God. You need to like realize that like you're not going to get there from here, and like you're not going to figure out the world, and you just need to like drop it and just trust Jesus, right? And all your little intellectualism is right. I mean, he could have done that. And it would have been one page, and it would have been true. So why doesn't he do that? And one of the reasons he doesn't do that is because it is not his intention that we would become anti-intellectual or anti-ambitious in accepting our humanity. Solomon was understood multi-continentally to be the greatest mind in many generations. It was not like he was this country bumpkin. He's like, you know what? All those people think they know stuff. They don't know stuff. For all their intellect, they don't have any common sense. That's not where Solomon lived. Solomon wrote more Proverbs than anybody. Like, the book of Proverbs is only like 15 pages long, but it says in another place that he spoke multiple thousands of Proverbs. Right? They didn't use the word science, but science is included in what he means by wisdom here. If you read through the book of Ecclesiastes, he talks about politics and economics and marriage and family and friendship and love and all kinds of things that are enormously valuable and that make terrible gods. And what he wants to do to set us free in happiness is not to tell us the pursuits of our lives mean nothing. He wants to situate the meaning of all our pursuits, all of our repetitive toils, in their proper place so that we can receive them back for what they are and live in them in all the joy that is possible. And so you can go through this book, and there's a whole number of them, and I'm just going to kind of skip through them. So there's this whole section on accepting our lot in life, that's just wise. That doesn't mean stay with your boyfriend that's beating you. It means accept that you're a human and your life is going to be full of repetition. And only when you embrace that can you embrace life and happiness. So, you can just think about it this way. Listen, the president, his life is boring. Do you know this? Like, he sleeps every day. He wakes up every day. He smells like BO every morning. And he goes and he showers, right? And then he reads newspapers. And then he goes to the same briefing sessions that have clearly a lot of bad information. And then he goes to all presidents, not just this one. And then he goes and he tries to figure out how to talk to some idiotic person that won't do the right thing, kind of like at your office, right? Except the other person's a world leader. And then he has lunch, and then he tries to get a workout in, and then he tries to text his daughters. It's basically the same toil as anybody else. Nobody has an exciting life, right? CEOs, same as a stay-at-home mom. They're all exactly the same. You do the same stuff you're basically not that good at over and over and over and over again. That's all. Even you take the best scholar over there at MIT, he's going to, for the rest of his life, he's going to do the same stuff over and over again. Right? It's all of us, right? You'd be like, well, he's going to make progress. Well, my kids keep getting older too, so screw you, okay? My kids are progressing, right? Sorry. We should move on. All right. And I'm not saying, none of those things are bad. Being president's an important thing. It's really important. Yeah. Being a researcher, all those, they're amazingly important, but they're only what they are. And all of them are full of toil and repetition. And if you cannot embrace and take joy in toil and repetition, you can't be a human being. And the problem is you are one. And you have to accept what you are before you can be happy as what you are. And Jesus demands that of you. Right? And then also you can take enjoyment in your life in its transience and toil. That is, so many people really believe that there's somebody or something out there that should make them happy. And what you're supposed to do is take enjoyment in the things that are right in front of you. Your happiness is your problem. Okay? And leisure is a terrible hope. And so is romance. To sort of overcome your personal inability to be happy. Because if you marry somebody or dating somebody, guess what? They're going to be a sinful idiot. Ooh, right? And yeah, they may false advertise a good bit while you're dating and it might seem pleasant, but ultimately you're going to find yourself with a real live human being and the ugly's going to come out and it's going to be normal life. You're going to feel enraptured in passion. You're going to wish that you could hurt them. You're going to like wonder if we're going to have this same argument again, and what are we going to do with this money, and wouldn't it be great if we had more, and is this kid really going to do that? And that's what life's, and guess what's going to happen like every night? Not sex. Right? Washing the dishes. And if you like cannot embrace that, you're kind of dead in the water. You're going to be unhappy most of your life. Most of your life. And that's not wise, according to Solomon. In fact, in all the places where he goes through all these sections like, well, this is meaningless, and that thing's meaningless, and this other thing is meaningless, and that thing's meaningless, after every one, there's a section of like, so take pleasure in it. Yeah, you're right. Love is totally meaningless. Enjoy your wife. Yeah, you're right. Work is like this terrible, it's just toil, toil, toil. Love it. Do it. Do it the best you can. Yeah, you're right. You know what? You can learn all the wisdom there is in the world and try to bring all this knowledge together, and you're going to die and be forgotten, and nobody's going to remember how smart you were, and your book's going to go out of print. While mine's still in print. You know, like, ugh. And it just is, right? So just do it and enjoy it, and you're right. It's totally just going to flower and die, and it's fine. You're just a human. And if you think that you're a God, you will believe every moment of your life is beneath you, and you won't be enraptured by its beauty. Right? And so there's lots. There's like 6 of these. So like wisdom, science, skill are still relatively valuable. They're just bad gods. So all of the pursuits, all of the like little Boston intellectual pursuits, like they're all good. School of government, economics, starting businesses, being an entrepreneur, serving coffee, being a mom, driving a car. These are all worthwhile pursuits, as long as I guess you're driving somewhere important and not just increasing your carbon footprint. But these are all worthwhile things. He has no interest in saying the pursuits to better and to know and to develop and all those things actually are commanded upon us on the first page of the Bible. Do you know that the first command of the Bible isn't to love Jesus, but to do science? Do you know that? The first page of the Bible, God creates human beings, and he says, go into the world all the way through it and subdue and rule over it. That is, bring out its creative potential, understand it as it is, and be the proper vice-regent of its care, i.e., do science and technology. Then, we decided to add a whole lot of sin to that. And he's like, no, that's not how I meant do science and technology. And so he had to add the redemption mandate in Jesus so that we could be brought back to our original creative purpose, which was to do our work. I wouldn't even have a job if we all just did science, medicine, technology right from the beginning. So you shouldn't all become pastors, for sure. There's a whole section on friendship and family that protects us and strengthens us, like that cute little wedding verse. A cord of 3 strands, not easily broken, right? And then diversifying your enterprising activity. There's this whole section on economics. Like, there's this section where he goes, listen, whoever watches the wind never harvests. That is, you can't be like, well, the market's not really good right now. I don't think I should get a job. Can I get a PS4? That's not how you should be. You go out and you have to be ambitious. It doesn't matter what the climate is like. You got to go and do something. You have to work. You have to act. And then he says, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You need to diversify what you're doing, because some things are going to succeed, some things are going to fail, and you can't expect God to work it all out for you if you believe and trust him. That's not how the world works. You've got to be wise. You've got to do these things, right? So he's basically saying basic micro and macroeconomics are enormously important. You should understand them and live according to them in terms of wisdom. He's clearly saying the pursuits of human life are important things, but ultimately they are relatively important, pointing us to the burden that God has laid on people and to lead us to this. To remember that we aren't gods and he is, and that we were created to revere. That is not primarily a word of fear. That is primarily a word of awe. That which we would love to idolatrously pursue for ourselves, he has always been, will always be, and even our imagination of our eternal moment of divine consilience in our own mind, the wisdom that we seek, is a tiny, paltry bit of sand compared to the beauty of the inner knowing and being of God himself. And that should kind of stump us. The reason for all of that is to recognize that we are meant not to think of ourselves as gods, but to have profound faith and awe in the unsolvable God. One of the reasons why new atheism is cool is because we simply cannot accept a God that doesn't give us a memo that just tells us everything. Like some kind of pre-divorce prenup contract. God can darn well tell us exactly what he wants to tell about us and not tell us for whatever reason he wants to tell us. There is no disclosure subpoena that the human race can put on him. And if he wishes to tell us less rather than more to have a psychological or moral effect on us, he darn well can whenever he darn well pleases. And he does, Solomon says. That is intentional. Where's my thing here? Okay. One of the ways to see this is when you read Ecclesiastes for the rest of your life, pay attention to how he's using the word wisdom. Sometimes he just means smart stuff. That's all he means. Relatively truthful things that help us live our lives. But sometimes he uses it as a body of knowledge that encompasses all things and solves reality. And he says, that is not accessible to humans. And when people say they have it, do not believe them. Right? He says, when I applied my mind to know wisdom and to observe man's labor on the earth, his eyes not sleeping day or night, then I saw all that God had done. No one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. Despite all his efforts to search it out, man cannot discover its meaning. Even if a wise man claims to know, he cannot really comprehend it. Then another section, he says, all this I tested by wisdom, and I said, I am determined to be wise, in that second sense. And then he said, but this was beyond me. Whatever wisdom may be, meaning total conciliant wisdom, whatever that is, it is far off and most profound. Who can discover it? See, that's the point. The reason why that's important is that if you walk through that logic with him, you begin to realize that the other options then are cut to death. Right? Because if wisdom is wise, but consilience is impossible, you actually don't have any right to give up on real wisdom. You just can't use it to produce your own total philosophy and therefore not do what God tells you. So you can't create your own little religion out of it and do whatever the heck you want and define yourself from yourself. So wisdom puts you on the hook so that you can't be a cynic. But if wisdom is also true, it means it constrains your behavior morally, but it also constrains how you look at yourself in terms of your own happiness. And if happiness most reliably comes from embracing what you really are, rather than going out and defining yourself from yourself and doing whatever you want, then you also can't be a hedonist. And if you can't be a cynic and you can't be a hedonist, you probably can't be a cynical hedonist. And if you can't be a cynical hedonist, you're out of actually a lot of modern options. Because most of them narrow down, end up somewhere in the neighborhood of something like cynical hedonism. And if that happens, it will drive you to say, wait a second, maybe I know things and they come from God and I can trust the one who knows them all. Right? Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but here we are. He says, don't you see, I've seen the burden God has laid on men, and there is a purpose in it. He does it so we will find ourselves in him. And sometimes it is just necessary to block out the horizontal glories before you'll really look for skylights. Now, one of the things that's important, the way the book ends is he says, so therefore, as young as possible, realize that you belong to God, that you're his, that you are a human. You're gonna die. Nobody's gonna remember you. Everything that you do is transitory and much more insubstantial than you'd hoped. The glory payoff, if it even comes, is going to be immediately momentary and nobody's going to care. And your book is going to go out of print. Your degree is going to go into a drawer. And nobody's going to think you're as important as you think you ought to be. That's what's going to happen. And if you will embrace that, you can be happy. By embracing, taking joy in every action, in every moment, which is what we are. But you can say, wait a second. Nick, you said at the beginning that God had put a desire for eternity in our hearts. And then you're kind of like, well, you're just going to die. But you said God put the desire. Was that only to frustrate us? And the answer is actually no, and Solomon actually knows it, which is interesting because at some divinity schools that will go unnamed, a lot of professors think that eternal life actually isn't even mentioned in the Old Testament. That's a New Testament invention. But if you read this paragraph closely, you will see that Solomon believes it. He says, although a wicked man commits 100 crimes and still lives a long time, I know that it will be better with the God-fearing men. How do you get better than living a long time on the basis of the structure of Ecclesiastes? He says, yet because the wicked do not fear God, it will not go well with them, and their days will not lengthen like a shadow. So what's the distinction between the wicked man and... So the wise man may die young, and the wicked man will live a long time. But what's the difference? The difference is that the wicked man may live a long time in this life. What will not happen to him is the thing that God has put into our hearts. How long at the end of the day do shadows lengthen? Well, in our experience, infinity. He presees that the ultimate end is that there actually is a place where God meets the desires of our heart, but it's actually not by making us gods. It's by making us everlasting humans who love, worship, revere, and enjoy God. And so the reason we must be humbled is the thing we want to be in this life we won't even be forever. In this life, we must be made to revere God because that is what eternity will be, us being little ourselves. We will be revering God forever. We may even not have conciliant knowledge in heaven. It's perfectly likely we can't even compute it even at our highest IQ scales, even if part of the resurrected body is maximal brain elasticity. Right? Who knows? But if we can embrace enjoying every moment in our vaporous life, think about this. How many times have you heard somebody say, I'm not sure I want to go to the Christian heaven because I think it'll be boring? They don't know how to be a human. They're going to be bored here, those people. If you become the sort of person that takes pleasure in every moment of your life, the duration of that life is irrelevant. And so you can have an everlasting existence, and you can be enraptured in glory every moment of it. And it doesn't even matter what happens in heaven, even if it is singing the whole time, which it isn't. And the reason why that matters so much is this. Like 500 years after Ecclesiastes, and yet 700 years before Jesus, in Isaiah 53, Isaiah told us about Christ's death and resurrection for us. And he said, he put these words in Jesus' mouth, and think about them in relationship to Ecclesiastes. But I said, I have labored to no purpose. I have spent my strength in vain and for nothing. Yet what is due me is in the Lord's hand, and my reward is with my God. That is, Jesus actually died in full absorption of the true futility that we face, which is the death in death, the hell in loss, the damnation in our deformation, and all of the things built into the meaninglessness of our horrors that are actually not part of our limitedness. And he suffered the true futility of our death and our hell and our damnation and our true lostness. And he took it So that through faith, not only can we experience what true humanity is now, we can experience true humanity in awe and in enjoyment of God forever, if we will believe in and follow the only one who was ever true humanity, Jesus. So I just want to encourage you, don't be a cynic. Don't be a modern Bostonian hedonist. Don't buy into that stuff. Don't be the achiever that's constantly looking to take pleasure in the outcome rather than in the actual moments. Don't lose the relationships and the work for its own value along the way. If you don't believe in the inherent worth of what you're researching, do something else. Give yourself to the moments and do something worthwhile in all of them. And trust that in doing so, you will actually experience true humanity. And actually, God gives his great gift of enjoyment in that moment. And through it, in believing and trusting in Jesus, he actually gives the thing that he's put in our hearts that we are supposed to desire, to be true humanity in the presence of true divinity, in service, love, and enjoyment forever.